The Shadow of the Torturer was written in 1980 by Wolfe, and it's a story about Severian, who's a young man in the Torturers Guild who betrays the guild by letting one of the prisoners take their own life. And because of that, he's kicked out of the guild and has to experience the world for the first time. It's a Bildungsroman told by an unreliable and morally gray, at best, main character as he undergoes a transformative journey. Wolfe introduces us to a bleak and a decaying world, but more specifically to Severian, who's a torturer, but in other ways he's a naive and still developing young man. Ready or not, when he betrays his guild, Severian is forced to experience life as he never knew it before. Upon betraying his guild, Severian is forced to start on a journey that goes beyond what was previously a relatively simple life. Unlike the majority of books that I read, I actually liked the first third of this book the best. Severian is still within his guild, and it feels like I'm reading an actual linear plot where Wolfe has goals as to where we're going, and it's pretty easy to see those. This world is not exactly like traditional science fiction, but it's beautifully written, and it's melancholy and it's tragic in a really brutal way. The final third felt really slow. It felt like a dream where you're trying to run, but you're stuck in glue or quicksand or something, and you just want to get somewhere, but you can't. It's so slow, and everything is being held back, and that's what it feels like. I also felt like I wanted to just yell at the characters because some of the situations get so ridiculous that you just want to say, just take a second and think about how ridiculous this is. It's just sort of unrealistic that no one would call that out, and it can be a little bit annoying as the reader. Most of the book, I think, is described best by what Liminal Spaces on YouTube said. He said that it's like Severian is taking a psychedelic trip, and he's describing everything that's going on to you, but you don't quite get what he's really seeing and what he's really trying to say and relay to you. It's slow and it's confusing, and it's mysterious to the extent that sometimes you don't even really know what's going on. One contributing factor to this is the prose. To me, it was nearly unreadable when I tried to read it not on a Kindle. I had to be constantly looking up words and definitions and phrases and even proper names, and it feels like reading Old English or something. And it uses like a plethora of archaic and lesser known words. It's not even necessarily common, interesting vocab. It's stuff that you would just never see. Wolfe, in the appendix, he actually claims that he's translating from some far future language to modern day English, and that he's having to use creative liberties to try to get the closest one-to-one translation, which is kind of interesting. At best, it's vocabulary challenging, and at worst, it feels like one of those YouTube videos that is like what English sounds like to a non-English speaker. Were I to attempt counterfeit of the unexampled speech of Wolfe through this tome, I'd resonate as such. Another maybe good, maybe bad thing is how Wolfe hints at things. He never really says them outright. And this isn't even just because of the unique vocabulary used, it's also how he just goes on describing the world and the characters. Things happen and you don't know if they're dream or reality. People will say seemingly unimportant things and they're just dwelled on forever. And weird things happen and you just sit there going, what? I do want to briefly touch on the misogyny in this book, and ironically, I felt more comfortable with it as it progressed and it got more vulgar and it got more concrete as the story progressed, because at the beginning of the book, it's almost like you could believe that Wolfe himself is just sexist and it's coming out in his writings. But as the book moves on, it's clear that Severian just has a terrible relationship with women. Personally, I think that that's just a really lazy way to write a character that you're supposed to make kind of evil, to just make them hate women or have trouble connecting with women or seeing them as humans. which Severian has trouble with. I think that's just lazy, but I don't think that it's actually Gene Wolfe being necessarily sexist. That being said, I do think that one way that it shined was through its characters. They're vibrant and they're well fleshed out, and they kind of remind me of like video game bosses. Each character kind of has their own quirk and their own specific attributes that really define them, and pretty much everyone is kind of evil, but you kind of like them and you appreciate their weirdness and their uniqueness. Severian himself is mysterious and complex. He's darkly intriguing while still being frustratingly evil. He's a power-hungry, sad young man, but he's still sort of filled with this wisdom that a naive child has before they're kind of corrupted by the world. One of my favorite quotes of his is, "I felt that pressure of time that is perhaps the surest indication we have left childhood behind." This book is like when you watch 2001, A Space Odyssey for the first time, and you're like, I know this is a really good movie, but I can't exactly say why. Reading this is like when you learn a new language in school, let's say Spanish, and you've learned it for a year, and then you're on a trip in Southern California or Mexico or something, and you see a bunch of gibberish in Spanish, and you don't understand what any of it means usually, but at one time in a restaurant, you're ordering something and you say, I know that that means ham and cheese sandwich, and it's super satisfying and it's fulfilling and it makes you want to keep learning Spanish. That's what it feels like reading him. The most famous example of this is when Severian is examining a painting, and he describes it in a very roundabout way, but if you really analyze it, you can tell that it's actually him describing what is a modern day, very important American picture. And this book is full of these little mysteries, and they're not as straightforward as that most of the time, but they're extremely rewarding if you can pick them out. This book reminds me of classics that you read in high school English classes. It's a slog and it's a grind. And it's not exactly the book that you might want to pick up off your nightstand to just get ready for bed, but it's certainly a book that I can tell is going to stick with me for a long time, and I'll be thinking about it for a while. To me, the payoff is not quite there at the end of the first book. It certainly was not a satisfying conclusion to all the mystery that's conjured up throughout the whole novel. If you're looking for something like that, you will not get that in this book. And I haven't finished the series yet, but I know that usually the answers that are brought up in these books either come A, later in the series, or through B, further analysis or deeper reading of the text. Because of this, I think that how much you enjoy this book depends on two specific thoughts about literature, and that's one, whether you think that books are meant to be read as one, even if they're part of a series, and then two, if you think that it's reasonable or even enjoyable for books to require significant scrutiny rather than a fast-flowing plot. To me, the book is gripping in a way that I do want to continue with the series, but not necessarily such that I couldn't put the book down. Thanks for watching.